From the design of our first hand tools to the creation of today's smart cities, design is one of the oldest and most basic of human activities. Being so broad and all-pervasive, how can we begin to define it? Herbert Simon once said, "Everyone designs, who devises a course of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones." Design is an intention to create order in the world, the purposeful organization of elements to achieve a desired outcome. The parts to a chair are arranged in such a way as to deliver the overall functionality of an object of support. A space rocket is designed for the propulsion required to deliver transportation of people and objects to outer space. Design is an intelligent process. Thus, how we approach design and what we create is dependent upon our understanding of the world and what we consider to be desirable outcomes. Our capacity to design things depends fully on our awareness of how the world around us works. What we once accepted as immutable and simply given by nature, we now can design at will, from the structure of basic materials to whole landscapes. Beyond being contingent upon our understanding of the world, design is also relative to what humans desire and value. We design for the things we value. As our values change, how and what we design also changes. A design paradigm is an overarching approach that is composed of our basic assumptions and theories about how the world works, what we value and want to achieve, as well as a complementary set of principles and methods with which to approach the design process. As our understanding of the world evolves and what we value changes, so too does what we design and how we design, our design paradigm. For much of human history, our capacity to design systems was very much limited due to our limited scientific knowledge. Hand tools, buildings, and bridges. The explosion of scientific knowledge that started in the early modern era eventually worked its way through to industry to create radical changes in our designed environment. The development of modern engineering gave rise to the age of machines of an ever larger scale. But more than this, new chemicals, new foods, fuels, and technologies of communications. With the rise of mass production, the expansion of commerce and the market system, came the need to design mass-produced goods, what we now call industrial design. Design became applied to shaping the form and features of products that were to be manufactured through techniques of mass production for a mass market. As the industrial age with its focus on basic goods gave way to consumerism during the mid-20th century, product designers were employed to create endless products with endless features to delight consumers. As marketing and sales became ever more important in the enterprise, it was now all about pleasing the customer, and design started to become more focused on the end user. The industrial age paradigm of designing the right standardized mass-producible thing shifted to ergonomics, interactive design, and eventually user-centered design. With a focus on customers came the realization that the end product was not enough, but what was needed were instead processes, what we call services. Now, it was not so much about things and their lovely features, but more about the value delivered to the end user within some overall service. In the services economy, a new design methodology emerged: design thinking. An approach that is more user-centered, experience-focused, more agile and iterative, more holistic in considerations of stakeholders, more collaborative as it cuts across traditional domains. Under the services paradigm, design was no longer just about products. Now everything that people did was starting to become open to design: healthcare services, education, organizations. By this stage, we now find ourselves no longer living in the rural natural environment, but increasingly in technology-saturated urban environments. Design is starting to become all-pervasive. Today, with the rise of information technology, the scale, scope, and complexity of the systems we are challenged to design is on a new level. Information technology connects. It connects across silos and domains to create ever larger complex systems. The challenge for design today is how do we build for this new world of connectivity and networks, rather than the previous silos of a disconnected world. Where once the challenge was largely for designers and engineers to focus on technical challenges within a specific domain, today, as things become connected, the challenge shifts to one of designing for whole complex adaptive systems of people, objects, devices, information, money, and natural resources. A world of the Internet of Things, smart systems, and decentralized networks where all sorts of things are talking to each other, acting, reacting, and adapting to each other peer-to-peer. The smart city is but one example of a complex engineered system that requires us to design for adaptive networks holistically. How does the transport system work with the energy and water network? How do we get the city's lighting adapting to people's needs while conserving energy? How do we create a seamless multimodal urban transport network? How do we design healthcare systems that integrate with the urban environment? To design for all relevant factors from food and exercise to air quality. This is the job of designers in the 21st century. Beyond information technology, the complexity of the systems we develop is being hugely increased by having to factor in many more environmental considerations. We are no longer just building for people, but now have to consider impacts on the environment, designing systems that take account of CO2 emissions, pollutants, health factors, and quality of life. Designing linear systems is no longer sufficed. We now have to think about material and energy flows and how they can be reused to flow in circles. Our design world is now one. A simple product may activate supply chains around the world in its creation, and after its usage, may once again be dispersed back to the far corners of the planet to influence ecosystems far and wide. The scale of what we are designing is shifting from things to companies, to whole supply chains and economic systems. Who we are designing for has expanded from a single user to vast connected webs of people spanning the globe. The complexity has increased hugely. When we ignore this elephant in the room, we get unintended consequences. We create systems that, by focusing on the end user, may make life lovely and convenient for a few people, while at the other end of those very same networks, we make life arduous for the many and destructive for ecosystems. In this context, we need not just a new approach, but also a new paradigm that helps us to understand and design complex systems. When things become highly interconnected, interdependent, and dynamic, we need to change our thinking to a systems paradigm to be successful. Systems thinking is a way of responding to complexity as it shifts our focus from looking at separate parts to looking more at patterns of connections and the whole context. The same is true for systems design. It is a way of designing that should help us respond to the complexity of the systems we have to deal with today, to create simplicity on the other side of complexity. Systems design is a holistic approach to design that starts with a consideration of how the parts interrelate to form a functioning whole. It is holistic in its attempt to consider all relevant factors and different dimensions of a system: social, technical, environmental, economic, cultural, etc. As the systems thinker, Dr. Russell Ackoff, put it, a part is never modified unless it makes the whole better. You don't change the part because it makes the part better, without considering its impact on the whole. That is systemic thinking. The architect is the profession that I think understands systems best. What he does is produce an overall design of the house. Now he produces designs of the rooms to fit into the design of the house. But he will never modify the house to improve the quality of the rooms, unless the quality of the house is simultaneously improved. and that is fundamentally the principle. Systems design is not designing the right product, nor is it designing the right service or user experience. Beyond this, it is about designing the right system within the whole context. It requires a greater awareness of interaction, a greater degree of intentionality, as the designer must see shaping the wider environment as part of their responsibility. To master complexity, we have to embrace it. Let go of the orderly, predictable, bounded, and controllable, and embrace the open, dynamic, unpredictable. Implicit in our understanding of design is the idea that we can control the system we wish to design, and that we are going to impose order on it. As designers and engineers, we love to specify detailed outcomes. This was possible by focusing on relatively simple systems that one organization could control and own. But complex systems are not like this. They are open, where anyone can join or leave. Like the internet, like cities, like transport networks, social networks, financial markets, etc. Our job is not to control and specify everything, but to more create the conditions for the desired outcomes to emerge. To learn to work with context, with connectivity, and protocols. The key design pattern for dealing with complexity is decentralization. We unbundle monolithic systems and convert them into module units that can be aggregated on demand via networks. Whereas our traditional approach is very much focused on designing things, complex systems design is about connecting these things through intelligent networks that are adaptive through their use of distributed data and analytics. Here, the challenge is no longer making things bigger and faster, but how to design the protocols and interactions so that diverse components can work together towards delivering the right functionality while accounting for social, economic, and environmental impact. We do not seek to design the system in all its detail, but focus instead on configuring the context, the local interactions that may lead to effective global coordination. Like birds flying in a flock, creating a complex formation out of only their local interactions. Rather than designing for more things, we design for adaptive networks. Rather than optimize for the end user, we optimize for the whole. Rather than seek perfection, we seek resilience. Rather than designing things that decay, we build systems that evolve. Rather than lines, we build circles.
Okay, so I hope that was helpful in framing what we're talking about here with systems design. We're going to jump into looking at our Miro board and a discussion about some of the topics there. There's obviously a lot of content, a lot of ideas, so it'd be good to have a talk about those, kind of unpack them. I'll share the link again. If anybody wants to say anything, share anything, your thoughts on that film as a whole, might be good to hear that. Otherwise, we can jump into these more specific questions. Okay, here's the link for anyone who came in late. Sorry, I'll share it with everyone. 1 second. So here's the link if you want to join the Miro board. We're gonna that film was broken down into kind of 4 main sections there. The first one was about what is design. Second one was about the evolution of design, how it's changed over time. Third section was around the kind of rise of complexity and the need for a new design paradigm. And then that last section we saw was about systems design. What is this? So this first section here, I'll share this link with you here, is asking, what do we mean by design? We actually had a chat about this with our design group a couple of weeks ago, and here are some of the things we came up with. It'd be great if you have any ideas or thinking around what is design, if you want to post it up there as a sticky. Love to hear that. So there's a few of us came up with a few ideas here. I think this is maybe Milan. He said it's the creation of stuff to make our lives better. So we're asking a pretty basic question here. Design is obviously something quite fundamental for us human beings. Milan's idea, it's the creation of stuff to make our lives better. Over here, it's a methodology of analysis and understanding the system and the process of identifying new solutions that is a better solution for the collective of stakeholders. I think this was Susan who maybe posted this. The analysis and understanding of the system and the process of identifying a new solution that is a better solution for the collective of stakeholders. Down here, the intentional arrangement of elements within a given system to realize some desired outcome. That was me actually that wrote that. Over here, the purposeful manipulation of reality to achieve a desired outcome. Not sure, this might have been John. Was this you, John? Yeah, great. All right, so any other, Joanne, did you have one up here? Did you post one already?
Yeah, that's the means to solve problems.
The means to solve problems.
Design is a process. Design is not the end, the utility, the goals. It's only one means to solve whatever problems.
Can you say anything about that means? Anything?
It's a way
what do you think it involves?
I think there's deliberate acts. That's what it involves.
It involves, I think key part is it involves some understanding of the system we're dealing with, right? We can't really go very far.
Oh, yes.
It's all going to be at random. We have to do some kind of understanding, some kind of analysis of the system we're dealing with. And I think there has to be some kind of conception of, it's about, as the other one said here, Susan was saying and so forth, and Milan was saying, it's about creating something better, right? We're trying to go somewhere with this. So we need, I think, some conception of what better might look like. And then the manipulation, the change of that system to try and achieve those more desirable outcomes. So it's creating something in a service org. It is creating something in a service org. It is a service. Okay, it's definitely the creation of something. Changing situations to make preferred conditions. Yep. Altering, changing things to a more desirable state. A way to create strategic decisions. Who is this? Okay, so it means to solving problems. Systems thinking is a radical shift in thinking, which shifts the focus back to the relationships of parts and whole, not just the parts. Okay, we're going to be talking about systems thinking later on. We're just talking about design here. So it's a means to solve problems related, created by a previous design. Okay, things go around in circles here. So this one here, from a Gaia point of view, humans meddling with nature is a disaster. So design might be more part of the problem than of solution. Good question. Is it? It's like this one here. Is it creating problems for us, or is it actually creating solutions for us? Who wrote this one? Purple sticky? No. Okay. What else we got? Thinker. Organize elements for the desired outcomes and value properties. Dinka, is that a person who's with us? Or maybe that's a quote from them. So that's, I think it's useful to have some kind of basic understanding of creating conversations, fulfilling desires and creating value, changing situations to make preferred outcomes. Okay, So I think it's useful to have some kind of understanding of what we mean by design itself before we start talking about systems design. Obviously, systems design is going to be, it's a particular approach to design that's bringing a systems thinking approach to this. So firstly, design is obviously about something that we want to change in some way to try and realize more desirable outcomes, should we say. Okay, the second bit here was about the evolution of design. So we traced it through initially kind of starting with product design or designing things. Shaping objects, should we say, is a pretty ancient activity of human beings. And then when we came to the industrial age, we found all this new body of knowledge with the scientific revolution, and that enabled us to actually manipulate things and change them on a much larger scale with much more kind of precision, much greater capacity to actually alter the environment and things around us. And of course, we came to industrialization and mass production, and we got industrial design and eventually product design for creating all these products for markets. The industrial age, with its focus on basic goods, gave way to the consumer age. In the mid-20th century, product designers were employed to create endless products with endless features to delight consumers. So a lot of what we've done as designers, isn't it? Design things, design products. Later then, we came with this idea of services. It obviously became more user-focused and ergonomic, and then the idea that actually what people are interested in is services. The services paradigm, in the services paradigm, design was no longer just about products. Now everything that people did was starting to become open to design. Healthcare as a service, education as a service, organizations, and so on. So in some sense, it's kind of the evolution of design is almost like us being able to design more and more things in a sense. If you went back a long time, we didn't think about designing education or even really organizations. Nowadays, we think about kind of designing all sorts of things. Anything else you want to say here about the evolution of design? Actually, in a month, our next presentation will be Sani, who's going to talk specifically about this, this evolution of design. So maybe we'll pass through this relatively quickly. Just a point, services have been designed for many decades. It is not new, certainly not new. No, surface design has been around for a while. Who posted this? How to design holistic consciousness, from making things to creating solutions to creating the conditions of existence. Who posted this?
I did.
Yeah, who's that? Egbert.
Edward in Germany. Hi.
Do you want to say a bit about that? Creating the conditions of existence?
Yeah, in the sense that we can really now design the way things work in the world for not only for us, but for all living beings here. And we have to design solutions for life on the planet to subsist. So that's quite a big and fascinating challenge in a way. And that's why I also wrote the other one, how to design holistic consciousness. Also, how can we, I think that a lot of problems we have come from a problem of perception, a problem of consciousness in humans. So how can we extend that or change that in a way that we can work and design in a more holistic way?
You think that's what systems thinking is about, changing our thinking in a way that's needed?
There's a link, of course, yes, because if we change the way we perceive things in the world, and if we change the way if we change the values we have, we change the mindset that gives rise or support systems. So it's more the sort of context and cultural context of the way systems come into being or are considered as appropriate that is going to evolve, I think.
changed the level of awareness, isn't it? I think in your first sticky, you're talking about the scale on which we're actually having an impact now, the scale on which in that film talk about how a product can activate these supply chains and these interactions kind of all around the planet. You know, a car, it comes from, yeah, all around the planet, Africa and minerals out of China and so forth. And we have a different level of responsibility in a sense when we're operating on that scale. It almost takes a different level of thinking and awareness to be aware of that and to start to account for it and design for it. So first, the purpose of design was to give ourselves an edge in the systems we're a part of. After that, the purpose of design became to manipulate the system we're a part of to ease our living. Now the purpose of design is to protect the systems we're dependent upon to allow our ease of existence. Who's the green?
That was me.
John, great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess we started off with basic survival, didn't we? We just changed things to try and survive, really. And
yeah,
then,
I mean, the first tools, they didn't change anything significant except for us, right? And after that, the scales began tipping of how much of an effect we had on the system. And now we are at a point where we might outgrow our own system, like the effect on our own system, with all the consequences that would involve.
Now the purpose of design is to protect the systems we're dependent upon to allow our ease of existence. It's kind of going back to the like fixing the problems that the past designs created, or
maybe more of a sense of scale, right? Because like if we're talking about biomass, humans are actually more abundant than like most mammals on the planet in terms of biomass. So like even in that basic sense, we start to become such a significant part of the system, and let's say the planetary system, that we have to make sure that we don't start knocking off dominoes below us while we are trying to build a better future for ourselves.
Great. So resource management, affordance. What is similar about product design and service design? What is different? Need to shift from beautiful products to user-centered design. Who is this? Do you not think we've already done that to some extent? I mean, user-centered design's been around for a while.
Joss, it's John here. You asked a question about the one that says services have been designed for many decades. It's not new, is it?
Yeah.
Can I just make a point about that?
Yep. Yep.
On that video, it kind of made the idea that design thinking was relatively new, but actually, when the European countries were developing the colonies and South America and all that, there was a huge amount of design of local communities and governments at that time. The pyramids were designed. The way that the Romans would wage war on different countries was a huge design effort. So I do have a bit of an issue about this thing about design thinking. I would probably more think that it's always been around, and we have maybe redefined it in a slightly different way that makes it look rather modern. But that's just the point I was wanting to make, that I don't think it's that new.
No, I mean, if you take the idea of design as a way of altering and manipulating a system to achieve more desirable outcomes, then obviously we've been doing that ever since we were chimpanzees. It's just a question of whether we start to kind of contextualize it, as you say, as design, and kind of package it into design thinking and come up with some process and start to call it design. Yeah. So there is a huge variety of maturity around design thinking. In many areas, old ideas have still not been adopted. There's a huge variety of maturity around design thinking. In many areas, who wants to talk on this? Who
that was me, Josh. No, I was just picking up that point about people saying, well, ideas have been around for a long time. But I think if you look around, there are ideas that have been around a long time, and they're good ideas, but they still haven't been implemented in certain fields. So, looking around in terms of design, you've got a mix of everything. I'd say you've got people who are still in the Stone Age, you've got people in the Iron Age, you've got people in the Bronze Age, you've got people who are sort of in the digital age, and you've sort of got all of that going on simultaneously. I think was really the point I was trying to make there.
It's very true, isn't it? Particularly in public sector, right? They haven't, maybe a lot of private sector and tech companies that got into the age of design thinking and user-centered design and all of this, but public sector, a lot of it's still kind of in the industrial paradigm. A lot of value, I think, is still created by closing that gap between what's, the latest in design and what's actually being implemented to make it more user-centered, exactly as you say. Very true. So, okay, context design. Who put that up there?
Just Dinkar, that was me, just. So the reason for that was that in majority of cases, whether you're designing a product or a service, one of the things which impacts whether it achieves the desired purpose or not is the environment in which it is, introduced or the adoption occurs. And unless that's also taken care of, number of times we've seen the design does not fulfill its purpose because you make certain assumptions about that design or usage of that design in a certain context. So while you design your products, services, it's also important to pay attention to the design of the context where it's actually going to be used, applied, probably reacted upon, maybe also an element around behavior design in that sense. So and that context keeps on changing, right? Once your product is in there, when people are using it or other people change it over a period of time. So that context keep on changing because that's not under your direct control, that's external. So it's also an important area of design as your product or service evolves.
True, isn't it? Very true. And that's why you need the systems thinking thing.
Correct.
And to think holistically about it, you can just think about this guy and his bicycle, right? It looks like a very fancy bicycle, but probably if you took it out into Delhi or somewhere, there'd be a lot of potholes and a lot of probably wouldn't work that well, right? In that context, it's designed for another one. But actually, the one I think of is I don't know if you heard of it, called the Cobra effect. Yeah, right. So if you're in India, you probably know that, but it's a good example when the British were in India, the colonialists, they had a lot of cobras there, and they wanted to try and get rid of them. So they introduced a little policy saying, if you destroy a cobra, we'll give you however much money, £1 or something. And they thought this was a great idea, so they introduced that idea, that kind of solution, into quite a complex environment. It worked for a little bit. The cobra population went down. But in the end, they discovered people started breeding cobras so that they could kill them and bring them in. So they stopped giving the £1 for every cobra because they thought it obviously wasn't working. And what happened, all those cobra breeders set all their cobras free, and they ended up in a much worse situation than they started. So that's another example.
That's true. In fact, a couple of other areas where I've seen this becoming an issue. One is the area where you're trying to introduce organizational or a behavioral design, right? And that's definitely a big topic, especially when people are involved. And second, when you're trying to design things like incentives, which is not necessarily physical system design, but you're designing a system to implement something. And if you're designing an incentive system, but it's not contextual how things are changing in a given society or in a given organization, that won't work. Precisely similar to the example that you gave, I think everybody, at least in financial services where I work, know the example of what happened with Wells Fargo, where they wanted to create a system that will incentivize account creation. And because I think certain branches or certain parts of Wells Fargo in the bank could not open new accounts, their people created fake accounts and they were incentivized for that. So some kind of stories like that would also indicate that context is also extremely important to design, not just the system to be used there.
Yep. It's the complexity of the environment. The people who are creating those incentives, they only have limited view and vision, don't they? And they don't know how, because there's adaptive agents in the system, they can't see how it's going to evolve and all the ways that they would. It's a bit like cybersecurity too. Like, it's a very complex challenge because there's so many people out there that might attack your system, and they're trying in so many different ways. And you don't know how all the technology will evolve over time. Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's stay going here. So the next section, we talked about kind of the rise of complexity, and that we're now kind of faced with designing very complex systems. Some of them look a bit like this, right? You think about a smart city or something, and we're starting to interconnect across many systems, right? In the industrial age, we created a lot of silos, and that kind of shielded us from a lot of complexity. The people in the water thought about water, people in transport thought about transport. And there was a minimal amount of there was an oversight as to how these might work together, but now we're actually starting to create very kind of cross-cutting systems. You know, if you think about Microsoft or IBM and how they're trying to create kind of solutions for smart cities they'll be dealing with all these different systems, and how do they integrate them so as to get interoperabilities, to get these kind of seamless processes and so forth. And that really is a new level of complexity to the kind of things we were trying to design before, individual products or specific services. Here you're talking about very complex systems. And again, it's not just information, it's this too, circular economy, right? That we have to consider so many different factors. And again, that thing of the scale of our impact on the planet, and we have to think about that in a holistic way, creates this new level of complexity. So we call these things complex engineered systems, things that look like this. The internet is an example of that. Traffic systems are very good examples of complex engineered systems. Many others. These require us to design for adaptive networks in a holistic way. Kind of designing context again, rather than individual thing. We're now designing a kind of a structure or a context within which we have these adaptive agents. Like transport is a good example, because people get to choose where they want to go in their car. You know, we get to create some structure there, but at the end of the day, people get to choose where they go in their car. So there are adaptive agents in it. We don't necessarily get to control the outcome, right? We just get to control the system to some extent. Yeah, we've already created quite a few stickies here. What we got as an inspiration for dealing with complex systems and making them resilient, try asking, what would nature do? Who is this? It's kind of biomimicry design, isn't it? Thinking, right, nature's been solving problems now for, what is it, 2 billion years or something? Is this you, Egbert?
Yeah, it was me again.
Yeah, go for it. Do you want to say anything?
I've just bought a book with this title, and I've just skipped it through, but not read it completely. But it's very, very interesting how in nature certain systems have a sort of built-in resilience based on things like diversity and capacity to deal with stress or strain coming on them. It's really, really interesting to have a look at that and take nature as an inspiration for strategies in dealing with complexity.
Yeah, and actually, it's a bit like the idea of conservatism, which is the idea that anything that survived, it must work, right? It's here, like, you don't survive for a long period of time if you don't work. So there's got to be something said for anything that survives for a long. And evolution is a good way of discovering that, the way it puts pressure on things to adapt and find solutions that work within that context. So it's a good way, and obviously we're starting to design like that now. We're starting to use evolutionary algorithms and so forth. But there's so much to learn, isn't there? The way nature's come across, ecosystems have come across all sorts of every kind of problem, haven't they? And they've discovered all sorts of every kind of solutions for them. So if we can just figure out how our kind of challenges, how the flow of traffic through this system resembles the flow of water through a valley or streams or whatever, then we can start to learn from that and work with it, I guess, is part of it. So decentralized networks, complex engineered systems that requires us to design for adaptive networks holistically, for user-centered design to stakeholder-centered design. Okay, what we got down here? Design like nature. Okay, that one just disappeared. Design like nature, code is gone again. We can see how vulnerable complex systems can be, the infrastructure of economy in the face of a pandemic and other unseen things. Okay, security systems. Systems were always complex. We were simply not a significant player for a long time. Yep, good point, right? Certainly because we're having this planetary scale impact now that we have to think about all these things. Now that we're becoming one, we have a responsibility or a necessity to play an intelligent part on the complexity level dictated by the systems, especially those of our own design, intentional or not. Okay, so design for complexity, design the conditions to dissolve wicked problems. Is this you, Joanna, dissolving wicked problems?
Yep. That's, you know me.
Do you want to say a word about designing? Maybe other people don't know about dissolving problems. You might want to share that with them.
So wicked problems or complex problems cannot be solved in a traditional sense because they're intertwined. You know, solving one specific one would cause more down the line. So Akoff proposed this concept of dissolving wicked problems. That means you don't really intervene in a traditional sense of that, hey, let's have a specific means. You actually set a specific conditions, prepare the environment, the habitat, so that the problems actually work out themselves. One of the examples in my upcoming blog post is how wolves changed the ecosystem in the Yellowstone National Park in the US. And that's a classic example of how you dissolve a problem.
Thank you. Systems for chaos management. Someone want to say a word about this? What I've seen is a greater lever with managers is to what I've seen is a great lever with managers is to help them see the difference between designing and managing complicated versus complex. They are so different, and almost all managers I come across deal with complexity using complicated methods. John, is this you?
Yeah, that's me. It's I mean, a health service is typical where you've got a health service that's designed around fixing people, and a complicated problem of fixing broken legs and surgery and all that. The reality when you actually go in there and understand what's actually going on is that a lot of the demand and a lot of the cost is with people that have complex problems. So it's not just a broken leg, it's about the fact that when they get home they haven't got someone to support them. They're living in a place where they can't get food or whatever it is. So managers haven't designed for the complexity, they're designed for complicated. So complexity would mean that you would then have to delegate decision making right down to the front line. You would have to have a different set of measures. You can't have standards. If you have standards, that's kind of the type of thing you would have in a complicated system. But in a complex system, you have to allow people to make their own way through the service, the staff themselves, their own way through the service.
And going back to that idea of unintended consequences and incentives, I heard recently about, you probably know more, maybe know more about this, John, than I do, that the NHS a while back had a crisis around people waiting too long in the emergency and accidents, and they put in a limit of 4 hours. I'm sure you know more about this than I do, but I'll say it for the others. They imposed a rule that's 4 hours was the maximum anybody should be waiting in the emergency room. So as you can imagine, like if this was a clock or something, a very simple machine, then that kind of rule, top-down rule might work. But obviously, there's the complex adaptive system, all these people in that system thinking about what they can do about this rule. And what happens, well, people just get backed up in ambulances, or people are there for 4 hours, but then suddenly they get moved straight into being a patient. They don't actually get to see a doctor, so on and so forth. Everybody's trying to find their way around this problem because it's obviously a complex system, a complex adaptive system. It's not something we can just impose a little rule and it's going to save it or change it like that.
A great example, Joss, and look at local doctors. They have 10 minutes to see each patient, regardless of what problem they have. I mean, that is, talk about standardization gone mad.
Okay, great. Let's look at the last board here. It's about systems design, and we've talked about this rise of complexity and that we have to now kind of design for these complex adaptive systems, and we really need a different approach to that. It's kind of imposing a single solution is not going to work. It's really going to require us learning to work with context. And that's really shifting our thinking and our whole design approach to a new level, and also working with incentives too. You know, if you're going to be successful in designing a healthcare system, it's going to be a lot about incentives too. I think that's very challenging. It's something we stumble upon a lot, I think. Anyway, rather than design for more things, we design for adaptive networks. So this is the section talking about what systems design is. Rather than optimizing for the end user, we optimize for the whole. So it's trying to go beyond the kind of user-centered world and think we're not just optimizing for the user. We're now trying to think about all of these stakeholders and all these different dimensions that are being affected. And some people have started talking about life-centered design, sort of Fjord, the design company, are talking about, where we actually start to incorporate more than just the users and so on. We start to think about all the effects on the ecosystem and so forth. Obviously introduce a lot of complexity. Rather than seek perfection, we seek resilience. Rather than designing things that decay, we build systems that evolve. So this is a lot of the regenerative design is a big thing, big movement these days, right? So how do we, if you look at the things we design, actually, they almost always decay, right? You come back 10 years later and the building doesn't look as good as when you first built it. It doesn't look quite as shiny as whatever. That's not what happens with plants or something like this. They regenerate themselves, recreate their structure and so forth. And that's the idea of regenerative design. How do we build things? How do we design things that actually regenerate themselves? So yeah, post up your stickies here if you have any ideas on that section around systems design. Rather than lines, we build circles. So I think that is the thing with systems everything. It's about circles, stuff going around, feedback loops, things going around in circles, and shifting kind of everything from a line to a circle, I think. So Russell Ackoff, we heard the quote there. He was an architect, had a lot of interesting things to say about design. He said, a part is never modified unless it makes the whole better. You don't change the part because it makes the part better without considering its impact on the whole. That's systems thinking. Kind of says it all, I think, in one little paragraph like that. It's really what we're looking for. Participation, diversity, multiple perspectives. It's difficult to do that though, isn't it? How do you get a kind of, obviously we're looking for some kind of ordered functional system. We have all this diversity and multiple perspectives and everything. sometimes it's difficult to get some kind of functional outcome. Who wrote this one?
It was me again.
Yep.
That's, I think, one of the biggest questions we have. I think we need to get a lot of different people into the room, or have citizen participation into systems design processes. But how do you decide who gets to say what? I think that's, how do you canalize the ideas and prioritize things and take decisions? I think that's a really challenging part of it. But I think we have to start working in a much more participatory way.
And well, how do you turn it into something functional, right, is the question. It's easy to get everyone in the room, but then your outcome's going to be a lot worse, or a lot slower, or just dysfunctional compared to having one or two people in the room. So the question is, we want that diversity, but then how do we create the structure? It goes back to context and designing structure that's actually going to get them to work together in a productive way. And I think that really is the challenge. So design for perpetual continuity. Who is this? It's kind of the regenerative thing are we talking about here? Nope. Okay. Design for substitutability and commoditization. Anybody want to say?
Yeah, that's me, yes, again, Dinkar. And the reason for that is actually there is another one which I've written, conceptual integrity. And some way it's also inspired from what Ekhoff was saying, right? At the end of it, of the conceptual whole, you will have options where things will have to probably change for local optimization. But as long as the overall conceptual integrity remains in place for the overall architecture, if I may say so, that's still a desirable goal from a design perspective. But when it comes to substitutability and commoditization, it's linked to two things. One, as design evolves, as the ecosystem around us evolve, as people find new ways of doing things, not just technology, they will find a better way to one part of your system to replace it with something else. So as long as the design is built for that kind of substitutability, it will be able to accommodate and still maintain that conceptual integrity. On the other hand, we know that over a period of time, there is a trend that something which was novel is going towards commoditization. I come from technology industry, so for me there are a lot of these examples. But this is also heavily inspired by some of the work that Wardley Mapping has been bringing. What Simon Wardley and team have been saying around how over a period of time things become a lot more commoditized, and then results in a newer innovation, being created as a result of those commoditized components, maybe in a different combination, etc. So that aspect is, at least in my field of work, I'm seeing quite a lot of relevance of these two properties of architecture and design.
Yep, for sure. I'd almost say it's part of the whole process that we're trying to commoditize things in some way. I mean, almost everything when it's introduced for the first time ends up costing a lot of money, and it's difficult to make, and only a few people can afford it. But almost everything, healthcare and cars and TVs and so forth have gone from very expensive to widely accessible through a process of design and innovation, and market innovations and so forth. But to the first point, you kind of want something robust, don't you, as the whole framework that's able to, as you say, like allow for optimization of the parts, but they have to balance that, isn't it? It's like, some framework that is able to structure the whole in a way that doesn't get out of balance. One of the parts don't pull it too far in one direction, or something that's robust to what the agents in the system may do.
Right.
Okay, so conceptual integrity. Okay, who gets to design? Understanding power dynamics are key. Who is this? Design towards holons. Yeah, Joanna, a holon, designing for holes, really, and parts. A holon is a hole and part, isn't it?
Yeah, this is so basically we need to start perceiving things as a part at the same time a whole simultaneously. So that's the concept of holons. I didn't come up with the word. I wish I did. So meaning you are a part and a whole, and all of us here in this session are independent wholes. We're capable of making decisions. At the same time, we are a part of multiple systems, your family system, your food chain system, your, the clothing you wear, so we need to be aware. So if you consider the concept of holons, and then you started expanding your perspectives and viewpoints, all of a sudden you say, I'm not just by myself. Everything I do say impacts all of the systems that I am a part of. At the same time, how do I make decisions? So designers need to go towards that. That's what it is, what it means designing towards the whole, or the holons, nested holes. And that's really what the world is all about. So it's no longer human-centered design. We are no longer the center of the universe. We're only a part of the universe along with other lives. So it's really this life-centered design. So picturing ourselves as participants instead of outside observers looking down and designing for other people.
It's great. It's a great point, Joanna. Always considering not just I think that's one problem with systems thinking, isn't it? Sometimes people just think about the whole. They go from one end of the spectrum, reductionism, to holism. And of course, obviously, it's always going to be about holons, the whole and the parts and the whole, and the interplay between them. I think that's the only thing that's ever really going to work ultimately at the end of the day, isn't it? Going too far into holism or going too far into reductionism is not going to get us into the world we want to go in. It's part of being able to live with the tension between the two, isn't it? It's the complexity that it creates. It's much easier just to go all into the parts or all into the whole. Challenges to live with the in-between and the tension and the complexity of the interplay between them.
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Okay, that's I think a good ending note. Our time is up. Really good discussion. Thanks a lot for joining, everyone. I hope you got a bit of an overview to systems design from this and what it's about. Next week, we have one of our design team, Sani, who's going to do a presentation and a follow-on discussion, kind of jumping into this section more around the evolution of design from product and industrial design, service design, kind of the rise of this systems design and the need for that. So I hope you'll join us again in a month. I'll list it there on the website, and I'll keep you all posted. So until then, have a good one, and see you again in a month's time. Take care now, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Joss. Bye.